Hi. Oops. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me to talk about smart contracts and oracles again in the last few days. Excited to chat through some interesting and useful ideas that I think could be a positive force in how we approach oracles and smart contracts and we make them work correctly. Now, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, there's one or two quick points that we need to cover, and then we'll get into the more interesting points. So the first point is the nature of the problem. How is it that smart contracts can't connect to external systems? It's partly related to the way they arrive at consensus. It's partly related to the security dynamics they provide to users. And they are not going to be able to talk to external systems because they are these uniquely secure systems that only really focus on securing transactions and blocks. And those transactions can be about token movements or they can be about certain computations. But the fundamental problem is that when you build contracts right now as a developer, it's very difficult. It's impossible for you to connect to those external systems that a contract might need to know about the weather, market data, any other kind of event around which you'd want to build a contract. So it's a very large limitation. The results and consequences of this limitation is that our space is largely about tokens. So our space is about how do you generate a token? How do you move a token? How do you exchange a token? How do you vote about a token? How do you assign ownership of voting based on a token? And that's great. That's all very useful stuff. But the reality is I feel there's much more in our space, in our industry, because our industry is really about digital contracts. And digital contracts power industries worth hundreds of trillions of dollars. The derivatives industry, the insurance industry, global trade is powered by digital agreements more and more. And the reality is that our percentage ownership of those of those types of contracts is small, and our focus is predominantly still on tokens, right? So the issue is that we don't really want to stay in a state where our entire industry is about tokens. We probably want to move to a place where our industry grows and starts to redefine itself as something that creates insurance products, creates derivatives products, creates savings and lending products, creates trade finance products to influence global trade in a fair, more equitable direction. And this is the type of thing that is really enabled by oracles. Now, I've already seen a few shifts in my time building smart contracts, which is now approaching 7 years. The first shift that I saw was going from what was then called programmable money, which was basically Bitcoin multi-sig, signing off on moving a Bitcoin, moving on to these protocol contracts where you didn't actually write your own contract. A protocol developer wrote a contract into their protocol, which was a very limiting experience. Then Ethereum deserves a huge amount of credit for taking us from those protocol smart contracts that took months, sometimes over a year, to get a new contract into a protocol. Protocols got bigger and bigger, worked worse and worse, and it took us into scriptable smart contracts. And Ethereum's done an amazing job of taking us to this world of, I can script up a contract, I can script up various conditions, I can script up the creation of tokens, exchange of tokens, voting about tokens, and that's all very exciting and useful. And I think it's seeded the value that's now being used to power more complicated applications. Those more complicated applications, they really depend on oracles. So they depend on the ability for the contract code that is scriptable to properly interact with external systems. And the key focus is on how it properly interacts with those external systems. So just like internal internal to smart contracts, they have to work properly. You also need proper external connectivity to all the systems that power these contracts. This is what I think has actually been driving the growth of DeFi. So DeFi is very, very exciting, and it's kind of the start of this growth into a redefinition of our space away from just tokens and into smart contracts that do something more. That's extremely exciting in my opinion. I've been working on that and waiting for that for years, and a lot of it is driven by. But it's all driven by application. Almost all of it's driven by applications that require external inputs about price data or some kind of insurable event. And a lot of it's driven by great users that use our oracles like Synthetic, Aave, BZX, Nexus Mutual. So people that are able to build an entirely new type of financial product on chain because they can consume data reliably from the off-chain world. And this is really kind of the point that I think I'm trying to make in the first part of our brief conversation here is there's now really two parts of a contract. Before, in a token environment, you had one part of the contract, which was the token generation contract, and then that contract generated its own data, which it then moves around. So there's no need for external data because the contract generates its own data, and then all the movement is generated within this kind of universe of the blockchain itself. But now with these DeFi products and all the insurance products that will get built and all the global trade products that will get built around blockchains, all of those products have two parts to them. So now you've added an additional second part of the contract, which is the off-chain interaction with systems that are less secure, less reliable, easier to game, easier to manipulate. And what you now need to do is secure that additional surface area. So you've created attack surface area in the hope of creating feature richness and expanding what smart contracts can do, which is a very worthwhile goal. But you at the same time have created attack surface area, which you need to secure. If you don't secure that attack surface area, or you try to build some kind of system and that system doesn't secure that attack surface area, then the end-to-end security of the contract is low, it fails, and essentially you don't deliver on the promises of a smart contract, and probably there's some loss of funds. So at the end of the day, what a smart contract could do with tokens with end-to-end security is something we now need to replicate in relation to the off-chain world, which is often less secure, and this requires a number of new approaches that aren't about building a blockchain, and they aren't about building web services. They are about building something called an oracle, which is a unique piece of decentralized infrastructure with its own set of problems, which I'll be glad to go through now. Now, this is the problem that we work on. We work on how do we get a highly decentralized system working for validating inputs, providing access to payment outputs and various tokens in traditional systems, and also connecting to various existing infrastructure, traditional infrastructure, so that contracts can basically get all the inputs and all the outputs they want, and developers can build everything that a web developer could build, but simply in the decentralized ecosystem. And there's a number of considerations where when you're trying to create these relationships between on-chain contracts and off-chain systems that are quite important and unique. The way we approach creating these relationships that have to be secured in a very specific set of ways is decentralization. So just like blockchains, we rely on multiple independent nodes. We have those nodes prove security through various cryptographic means, and we actually generate a huge amount of data to make sure that the information that users use to assess nodes is of a very high quality. We always focus on very high quality data delivery, so we can't just create an infrastructure that's decentralized and that provides a lot of data about node operators. We actually need the infrastructure to provide certain levels of validation and guarantee about the quality of data that it's ingesting and actually transporting, because a data transport layer transporting bad data isn't very useful. Even if it has one or two guarantees, and it doesn't super matter because garbage in, garbage out, and the quality of data is quite important. We also seek to provide crypto-economic guarantees. Those guarantees are based on staking. Defense in depth is a practice we take very seriously, where we don't just apply decentralization. We actually layer on trusted execution environments and the use of zero-knowledge proofs and other secure approaches to make sure that the data transport layer in the form of an oracle is highly reliable and that data is well validated. We are very lucky to do this with a large open source community of truly talented developers, extremely competent node operators, truly, in my experience, uniquely original researchers, and very astute security auditors. So we have a large open source community working on this together with us. And we make this capability available to all chains that we can, and we have many more going live, and that actually is a benefit to any one of those chains, because the more chains that there are, the more markets that a data provider can sell into. So the fact that we support more chains is actually a collective benefit to everybody, because a data provider can now sell to a larger market, and therefore everybody gets more data. But one of the main places where people do build DeFi applications is Ethereum, and that's have been a big focus for us, and where we actually have the most variety of data products available today. Now, the first approach that we took to solving this was some of the basic security assumptions about how do you have an oracle mechanism that succeeds at meeting these high standards of smart contracts and the security guarantees which they give. The thing you don't want to do is you don't want to replicate a traditional centralized model and hope that that centralized model can mesh with a decentralized computational model, because it doesn't. If you create a single point of failure in a single node, then that point of failure again and again has bitten people pretty hard and had their application fail. So the application of decentralized security to the Oracle mechanism is as important as the application of decentralized computation to the blockchain itself. The way that we approach this is in a pretty direct manner. We have full independent nodes. They're Sybil resistant. We focus a lot on the quality of the node operators and proving to users that they're of a high quality. And essentially, it's the approach of decentralizing and creating a decentralized computational infrastructure, which will be used for the purposes of data validation and providing high quality data to contracts rather than the operation of the contract itself. The second problem that I would say we decided to really focus on, and which I think it might be time to illuminate the significance of in the context of today's environment and the fact that more people are putting more value on chain, it just seems like a good idea to explain what some of the assumptions people should and should not make about an Oracle mechanism and the quality of inputs it's providing into their system. So one of the first things to consider is garbage in, garbage out. So if you have low quality data and you have some kind of data transport layer, some kind of Oracle mechanism of whatever promised security guarantees or whatever properties it has, you will get garbage out. So the thing that I'm unfortunately seeing is a number of people wholesale ignoring basic data methodologies, basic data quality concerns, and then still encouraging people to put value into using a data transport layer that ignores data quality. And I think that's a very serious problem that creates significant risks for a failure in one or another DeFi application, and that failure will then start to color DeFi and possibly even our space depending on its size. So our goal is to create a secure Oracle mechanism, but to also provide high quality data. And basically the hurdle to providing high quality data is the ability of a node to use credentials. So credentials are basically the passwords that allow people to access premium resources like a premium paid for data resource. Many of the Oracle systems out there that I've seen, whether they're home baked or otherwise, they often just resolve themselves to use on-chain, off-chain data that's really of low quality, and they just assume that data is equivalent and I can just go to a single exchange and get some data and it'll be fine. The reality is that people who build financial products take data quality extremely seriously, because data is an extremely important part of what happens with their contract. And as I said earlier, if you're expanding the attack surface area and you're expanding the risk that you're taking through more features, you should take the additional attack surface area and the additional risks added through these additional capabilities at a very high degree of seriousness. So in our case, we've supported premium credentialed APIs from the start, and we actually in our reference contracts only use premium data sources. We don't pull from any one single exchange or some kind of free open API. Now, the next dimension of these problems is actually quite interestingly replicating those same guarantees for the on-chain connection between a contract and a node. And that actually happens in our case through a service agreement. So we have an on-chain service agreement that relies on a smart contract sending a request to a Chainlink node. That request is generating a service agreement which defines all the parameters under which a node will be delivering data to it. Now, this is a more advanced feature that we're improving and working on, but this is a very important consideration, especially as value grows. So initially, if you don't have this capability, it may or may not be an issue, but as value grows, you definitely need guarantees from the Oracle mechanism and the data provider that you're going to have high quality data, that data is going to be delivered at a certain speed, at a certain level of quality, and that people's incentives are connected with that delivery of data. Conversely, I'm seeing one or two systems or certain home-baked scenarios where people make an Oracle, they use low-quality data, they don't define the relationship between their Oracle and their contract, which leaves it wide open for the Oracle to just say, oh, I can't deliver the data, maybe the fees are too high, or some other collection of reasons, and when they don't deliver the data for whatever collection of reasons, the relationship between the oracle and the contract weren't sufficiently defined, and because they weren't sufficiently defined, it's not even clear what happened, and it doesn't impact the future business of that node operator or data provider. Now this is an issue where you need multiple guarantees. You need an end-to-end guarantee of data delivery. This is what our system seeks to provide, and I think it's another important part of assuring that data is properly delivered, because that's essentially what oracles in the case of DeFi are doing the vast majority of the time. What all of this does is it actually generates, in our case, a system that everybody can go view and use right now, where they can define the very clear parameters under which data is delivered. So they can get access to a very large collection of nodes. Here's just a small cross-section of them. We don't usually make Oracle networks of less than 7 nodes. We have networks of many, many more, probably soon approaching 30 and beyond. And the goal is really that users can compose the parameters that they want a data provider to meet and that they want a node operator to fulfill, and that is extremely clear. And here you see a node job ID, and a job ID defines the exact very specific work that a node will be performing and that it'll be doing to assure the quality of data, and it'll be doing to make sure that data is delivered from a specific data provider. So this level of definition is quite important, because at the end of the day, at higher amounts of value, you're going to need to prove this to users. So on the one hand, you should have serious concerns as a developer about the quality and the security of your application from a data point of view, but you should also be cognizant of the fact that at a certain amount of value, users are going to begin demanding that you provide them with proof of your end-to-end security, and that's where a system that allows you to show that proof will be quite valuable. Another dimension of that proof is the ability to show various information about the node operators. So one dimension is, once again, data quality and defining and proving the relationship with data providers and showing that data quality is assured. And the other relationship is showing the quality of node operators, which our system tends to spend a lot of time focusing on and generates a lot of data. All the data we generate is open, it's on chain, none of it's closed, and it's something that any number of groups can analyze. I'm actually very excited to see a recent development in our community where somebody created something called reputation.link, where they've scrubbed a subsection of the Chainlink nodes, and they've allowed people to compare them on response time, on a number of important metrics that essentially define the performance history of that node, and that basically define for users on what dimensions that node excels or falls through. And it's I think it's in its early stages and it's developing, but it's very exciting for us to see that people are able to take the data that our system very meticulously is focused on generating, and then analyze that data to provide greater insight to users about what nodes should I use, what data providers should I use with those nodes, what is the likelihood that this quorum of nodes and this collection of data providers will give me the correct set of outcomes for my contract and properly reduce the risks for my users. And then, even not more importantly, but in certain cases also very importantly, how can I prove that to my users? So how is the system that I'm using for oracles sufficiently able to prove that? And this is where I've seen a few systems apply a strange dynamic around security through obscurity, where the systems start to say that, you don't know who the node operators are, you never need to know who the node operators are, or there's some positive dynamic around the anonymity of node operators. There is a positive dynamic around the anonymity of node operators from a censorship resistance point of view, and Chainlink can accommodate that, because there's hundreds of node operators, and you can compose huge networks of hundreds of node operators that are censorship resistant, just like blockchains are pseudonymous. But this is where blockchains and oracles kind of diverge, because oracles need to provide a very different set of guarantees to their user and to their contract, and they're basically their counterparty in the form of the contract. So I think that our system is focused completely on moving away from security through obscurity, and I'm really excited to see that there's people already using all the data we generate to start proving to users that our node network, that the node operators in our system are highly reliable, and I expect that this will eventually lead to the node operators with better performance metrics getting more revenue, which will drive a virtuous cycle to instill a greater urgency to provide more security, which will drive greater fees, and eventually that'll of its own right, create a highly reliable infrastructure, because security through obscurity doesn't work, and because that's a fundamental kind of precept that anybody making an Oracle infrastructure should seriously keep in mind, in my opinion. The other beneficial dynamic is, once again, data continues to accrue, and you suddenly have an environment where you have a lot of data about the reliability of nodes and their ability to perform certain functions for contracts. And I think that the goal of our system is to provide high quality data, to make sure it's highly securely provided, but to also step away from any kind of dynamic where people get some kind of weird security guarantees from security through obscurity. And I know I'm repeating myself, but I've just seen one or two of these ideas, and I think they're extremely dangerous, because if you talk to anybody in the security community and you tell them I'm building a system that relies on security through obscurity, like a first-year security engineer will tell you that this is just not the direction that you want to build a system in. So our system is focused on entirely the other direction, where we're basically making sure that as much data as possible is getting to users, getting to contract creators, and being used to actually incentivize node operators to become more secure, so that greater security is rewarded by higher amounts of usage, and that's the basis on which our system continues to grow in security, and where we develop a web of trust where node operators can be well relied on, because they have so much proof of their reliability, along with other key conditions that they're able to meet. One of those other conditions is staking. So it's the ability to provide crypto economic guarantees. Crypto economic guarantees are basically a deposit, in this case staking, where you put up tokens against that same service agreement. So link tokens are used to guarantee that data is properly delivered. If it's not properly delivered under the very, very clear conditions set out in the contract, in the service agreement, well, then people lose money. And that is a very clear motivation to maintain the security of that Chainlink node. And even in cases where the Chainlink node is run by a data provider, for the data provider to provide accurate data, because they're one and the same with the node now. Now, at the end of the day, what you arrive at is certain situations where you start to look at decentralization of the data sources once you've decentralized the middleware layer, and that's the next section I'd like to jump into. What we do there is we have a lot of flexibility in our system, where some node operators are data providers, some node operators are just high-quality node operators with a huge history of success, and high-quality DevOps teams, and they pull data from data providers that are not yet able or willing or interested to put data on chain. I'd like to look at a few scenarios where people have considered how to approach data delivery, which I once again think holds significant risks. And since this is a conference for developers, I feel it's just useful to kind of describe some of those risks and put those out in front of people. The first risk is the idea that we're going to go to individual exchanges instead of a data aggregator, and that we're somehow going to get something called market coverage. So market coverage is very important, because if you don't cover a part of the market where volume could suddenly shift to, you're suddenly not getting an accurate price. This is why all real financial products are fed with data from high quality data firms. It's because they smooth out this risk. And I've seen people start to make a data aggregation product together with an Oracle. And this is an extremely worrying situation, because the ability for people to make a data aggregation product is a unique skill set that is something we actually rely on high quality data aggregators, and they feed data into our contract. So let me just walk you through how a scenario like this can fail in a very clear and obvious way. So let's say you started with ABC Exchange, but then D&E Exchange showed up. And on Tuesday you were at ABC Exchange and everything looked great, but then because you're not actually running a data aggregation or a data company, D&E Exchange show up, and now they have all the volume. Well, guess what? All an attacker has to do is they now have to manipulate the thinly traded markets that you started with. And because you're not running a data company and you don't have a team of 5, 15, or 20 people like some of the data providers that we work with, you're suddenly hugely exposed. And this architectural decision alone, which I've seen people start to make, can expose their contract to massive, massive risk of failure, can cause loss, and that loss will then start to color our entire space, which I would love to avoid. So this is one scenario that I think people should strongly, strongly avoid. And I think anybody who's started going down this path should talk to people who have made financial products and who have used high quality data to make those products, and seriously consider whether this is a risk that's worthwhile, because in my opinion, it's a very serious risk. The second dynamic that we've noticed is that sometimes people say, no, I love one exchange, and I'm going to go to a single exchange to get that data only from there. That's an extremely worrying dynamic, because now you've just compounded the problem. You've created less market coverage, and anybody that's running a system with that approach to market coverage is taking significant risks, especially if volatility goes up or down. So if there is no huge price changes, then perhaps it seems like it's working. But in situations where price discovery starts to shift, or volume starts to shift, or volatility grows, you certainly can have a scenario where you appreciate market coverage very quickly, but you can't attain it because you're only connected to a single data source. It's quite a serious problem. The other large risk is that single price data source can then be manipulated. So if an exchange has a token market and that market becomes thinly traded, and that's the only exchange you pull data from, that might work for one or two of the pairs that are widely traded and highly traded on that exchange. But if it's a pair that's thinly traded, then you opened up a huge attack vector. And this is something that we completely avoid in our system, and we suggest to everybody to avoid, whether they use our system or not. But if people are worried about this, then they should talk to us, and we have some amount of expertise on this. Anybody architecting a system this way at the time, they're opening themselves up to huge volatility risk, to have inaccurate prices on their system, which can allow theft and loss of funds, and the failure of the platform. And then they're opening themselves up to another very, very simple attack, where all somebody needs to do is manipulate a thinly traded market, which realistically you don't even need experience coding to do. You just end up putting in a bunch of orders in a certain manner, and you manipulate that price, and then you can manipulate the outcome in the underlying application. So it's really a design pattern that I really, really wish people would stop doing. And if they want to stop doing it quickly, they're welcome to work with us, and we're glad to help them with that. The other dynamic that I've seen that's quite worrying is I've seen people ignore pricing data methodology. I've seen people suggest that a methodology that can be wrong in times of volatility is somehow safe. It is fundamentally not safe. You cannot say that I have a pricing methodology that on Black Thursday would have given back a price that had 20 or 30% deviation, and your pricing methodology gives back a price that is accurate to the minute or something like that, with market coverage across all the places where price discovery happens, and tell people to rely on a price that in a time of volatility, which often happens rapidly, is off by 20 or 30%. A 20 or 30% difference because somebody chose the wrong data methodology for price can create a situation where people can simply steal money from that platform to a massive degree. And it's a very, very worrying dynamic, and I think people should seriously consider the data methodology that they're using to provide data to their application, because once again, garbage in, garbage out, and it's once again a serious issue, because if you have garbage in and you have money, other people's money at stake, you have a serious problem where that system can fail and people could lose money. And this can fail on the data source quality level, the data methodology level, and also on the Oracle data transport level. But once again, it's not an engineering problem, it's a data quality problem. And if this is a problem you guys want to work through properly, I suggest contact somebody who has experience with that. We, in our case, have experience with both of those dynamics, and we're glad to help everybody build a good DeFi application. Another worrying dynamic I've seen is the concept of, let's take any of these low-quality approaches for generating price data and combine them with a higher quality approach like ours. This fundamentally doesn't make sense. I don't understand how combining lower quality data with higher quality data creates anything but lower quality data. I understand that people want to decentralize oracles or oracle mechanisms, and I'm glad to do that when there is high quality data behind those oracles. When there is sufficiently high assurances that oracle won't fail from a technical point of view, which very few people can give me right now, and that the quality of the data delivered is not just waved away as a problem not for today. It really is a problem for today. It's a problem of the end-to-end security of your application. And so when people show up and they suggest, hey, let's just combine the 2 or 3 bad data methodologies I showed you with a good data methodology that can provide accurate prices, and let's weight them all equally so that the 2 bad data methodologies can overwrite the 1 good data methodology, I start to think about the consequences of that, and the consequences, don't make me very happy for the people thinking that direction. So it's a very, very serious risk. I suggest people take very deep thoughts about whether combining low quality data with high quality data does anything but create risk. Now, if you do want to do that, we have something called a Meta Oracle, and we're working with people to use a Meta Oracle to intelligently combine and properly weight inputs from various on-chain price data sources, various off-chain data sources through us and other systems. At the end of the day, if you are set on combining data together, it would make sense to use a framework that can weight it and that can give you the features to properly mitigate the risk of a system that perhaps doesn't provide higher quality data. This is something we work on literally every day at this point, from morning until late at night, and we're very glad to work with you. So if you do have this idea of combining Oracle mechanisms, it's going to be very difficult to do successfully today due to the quality of what else is out there. But if you do want to do it, we're glad to talk to you. In certain cases, it might make sense if there's like some kind of weather data or there's something that you need to combine in some specific way. The way we approach these problems is built through years of experience. We once again either have the data providers being node operators themselves, and therefore you have a minimized amount of surface area because data providers are node operators, and actually the guarantees are once again for the same entity, so they're on the hook for the service agreement as a data provider and as a node operator. But our system has very, very large market coverage because we use all the best data providers at the moment, especially for something like crypto prices where that's particularly sensitive. And we basically have an ability for the node data providers that are not yet ready or are not yet providing data to blockchains to provide that data from through extremely high quality node operators. So the importance of our system is the ability to have data providers that want to run nodes, and that's going to be a slow process because the market for DeFi data delivery is not as big as it will be relatively soon, in my opinion. But you do need a system where the data providers can provide data through high quality nodes. So you do need a system where if a data provider has high quality data and they are not wanting to provide it by changing their infrastructure or running a new piece of software, that there is a way to get that data to contracts so that people can build those contracts and therefore give that data provider a justification for providing even more of that data, because it's a chicken and egg problem, right? Now, all of this is available today. You can go on feeds.chain.link. If you're a DeFi developer, I suggest you don't have to choose Chainlink, but you really should be aware of the issues and the data quality risks, the data methodology risks behind the data quality that you're getting, the Oracle security risks, and the guarantees your oracles are actually giving your contracts. And this is what our system is actually focused on, and we have it live on feeds.chain.link with a large multitude of different pieces of data already available for your contract to kind of just pull and start using. And we're very excited to help everybody build a great application. And if this is something that you feel as a developer is a worthwhile undertaking, and you think it's something that's going to benefit DeFi, and you can see how it's benefiting you and your application, and you're interested on contributing to either our core team or our open source community, we're also very excited to work with you. So our entire team is basically here to provide this capability to the DeFi ecosystems, to smart contract developers, allowing them to build applications that go beyond tokens, go on to redefine our space. And we're excited to work with people as a user or as a participant in our ecosystem, and we're actively growing and looking for great developers, great integration engineers, product managers, and various people in security functions as researchers and others. So we're very excited to work with the community in every possible way. And if you do have questions about the security assumptions behind the Oracle you're using or an Oracle you're thinking of using, you can always just contact us and ask us questions. So we're always glad to just answer questions and help you define what the right architecture is, and we can just give you what the right questions to ask would be, so that you can make an informed decision about the risks that a developer like you would be taking on when building an application, because those risks are very significant, and they are not just the same as building a web service, and they are not even the same as building an Oracle mechanism. They are multifaceted, because you're talking about interacting with other systems that are now having basically, in many cases, complete control over whether your contract is either useful or highly reliable, which is basically what's being built. So I'm eager to show this to you folks, and I'm excited to find a good way to work with everyone in the Ethereum community. Thank you.